You can hear me okay? Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our fall session. I'm going to take a few minutes to let everyone get logged in before I get started. It's good to see everyone here this morning. Welcome all to our first time attendees. And we'll get started shortly. Okay. I'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Egypt Lloyd. Along with my father, Dennis Lloyd, and other family members of the Lloyd family. We founded the Slave Legacy History Coalition in 2021. And today is our beginning of our fall monthly meetings, which is also our third year, beginning 3 years ago since we started this coalition. So welcome all the first time guests and our reoccurring members that's here with us today. We are very excited today about our good friend, Dr. Shelley Viola Murphy, who will be giving a great presentation. I did like to start off with just one moment to briefly take a moment to honor the lives that were lost today. As you know, it was 9/11, and that's today. And I just want to take a moment, may we never forget the tragedy that happened and people's lives that was lost during that day. Before I get started and turn it over to Naomi Gordon, our senior lead project coordinator, I would also like to mention that we are growing. There's a lot of new things that are coming into place, so please stay tuned. But I would like to take a moment to let everybody know that we do have an additional project coordinator, Alex Goutier, who's here with us today. He's been an asset to our coalition. So whenever you get a moment, please have the moment to welcome Alex to the coalition. Before I start with our introduction of Dr. Murphy, I would like to turn it over to our senior project coordinator, Naomi Gordon, who will give the announcements today. Naomi?
Hi, good morning, everyone. We have quite a few announcements today. So as I'm speaking, if you're new or joining us for the first time in a long time, please utilize the chat and introduce yourself, say hello. We'd love to know who you are. Well, first order of business, I'd like to thank everyone who attended our summer programming, including our trip to historic Deerfield, as well as our trip to see the play Revolution's Edge. It was really great to see folks in person. As for events in the community, Hidden Jamaica Plain is seeking a researcher for a short-term history project. Applications are due this Friday, and we will drop in the chat how to get in contact with them, as well as the full job description. And then as for events happening this week, tomorrow at the Boston Athenaeum, the Athenaeum is honored to welcome poets Danielle Legro George and artress Bethany White as they present the collection Wheatley at 250, Black Women Poets Reimagine the Verse of Phyllis Wheatley Peters, which features the voices of 20 Black female poets to reimagine Phyllis Wheatley's work. And then this Saturday at the Boston Public Library, Charlestown branch, there will be a panel discussion about the untold stories, historical trauma, and transforming difficult histories with love, empathy, creativity, and imagination. The panel speakers will be artists Del Marie Hamilton, Angela Counts, and Professor Nicole Aljo. Kiera Singleton, Executive Director of the Royal House, will be moderating this event. And then jumping ahead in the calendar, on October 19th, Deborah Weiss's play, A Revolutionary Encounter in London, will be presented at Christ Church, Cambridge. The play is about the little-known meeting between two of Boston's most historic colonial icons, Phyllis Wheatley and Benjamin Franklin. And then to help me announce coalition-specific events, I'm going to turn it over to Alex.
Good morning, everyone. All right, like Naomi said, I'm here to talk about some of our upcoming events. So the coalition is speaking alongside a couple of our partners at the upcoming Massachusetts Historic Preservation Conference on Friday, September 27th. We will be part of a panel advancing inclusive narratives, insights on interpreting enslavement and freedom, featuring speakers Kayla Coleman, Scarlett Hoey, Lauren McCormick, Marika Van Dam, our very own Naomi Gordon, and myself. Looking a bit ahead on November 7th from 6 to 7:30, there's going to be a Partnerships of Historic Boston event, Undergrads Before Rail, Escaping Slavery, Claiming Liberty, presented by author Margaret Newell and Egypt Lloyd. Margaret, as an award-winning historian, will tell stories of Native and Black people escaping slavery, as well as the people who helped them. You can catch this event at the Central Boston Public Library location in Copley Square or online. And last but not least, our next meeting is Wednesday, October 9th from 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. on Zoom. Presenting for us is Camilla Red Knight, a communications professional and president for the League for Women for Community Service here in Boston. Join us to hear from Camilla about one of the oldest continually operating Black women's service organizations in the United States. Thank you. I'll pass it back off to Egypt.
Thank you, Alex and Naomi. Great job. So now I have the privilege to introduce our prestigious guest, Dr. Shelley Viola Murphy, who is a genealogist for over 30 years. Dr. Shelley Viola Murphy, aka Family Tree Girl, was born and raised in Michigan, now living in Central Virginia. She conducts genealogy workshops at local, state, and national conferences. Murphy serves as on the boards of the Library of Virginia and the Albemarle Charlottesville and Fluvanna Historical Society. Murphy is also the coordinator and instructor and the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute, and develops staff and public genealogy educational programs for the Center for Family History and the International African American Museum. Additionally, she serves as a genealogist general for the Society of First African Families of English Americans and trustee for the International Society of the British Genealogy and Family History. She is currently working for the University of Virginia as the Descendant Project Researcher-seeking descendants of the enslaved laborers who helped build the university. An adjunct professor at Averett University since 2009, Dr. Murphy's personal research focuses on Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the UK. So without further ado, please welcome our speaker and presenter today, Dr. Shelley Viola Murphy.
Well, thank you for that introduction and welcome everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I'm going to go ahead and put my slides up and we will get rolling. Okay, how's it looking, Egypt?
Looks good, looks great.
Thank you. So the title is Tracing Lineages, Unearthing the Descendants of UVA's Builder. And once I go through here, you'll get an idea of what I'm referring to. Back in 2007, the Board of Visitors of Virginia apologized for slavery. And so I'm gonna say this very generally. A small group of students said that's not good enough. You know, apology doesn't mean anything. This plaque, which is at, and I'm going to try to describe, it's at the bottom of a staircase, steps from a hallway. There's this plaque that you see on the slide, acknowledging the several hundred women and men, both free and enslaved laborers, you know, and what it says, whose labor between 1817 and 1826 helped to realize Thomas Jefferson's design for the University of Virginia. So from that rallying from the students, the president at the time was Teresa Sullivan, and she put together a commission. And so, of course, the students had the committee, which was called the Memorial to Enslaved Laborers. And so then it went on to a competition, and they created that commission to oversee what was going to be needed, what was going to happen. And from there, right from the beginning, UVA went to the community, which would be the Charlottesville and, of course, the area community. And you'll see what came out of all of that from this presentation. So let me give you a quick glimpse of the memorial first. It's in layers, as you can see on the right-hand side. And Howler and Yoon were the folks that won the competition. Now, the memorial can hold up to 4,000 names. So the few hundred doesn't quite equip or match up with the 4,000 names. But as you can see, the whole point, which the input from the community was really about a gathering space as well. And so again, you'll see a little more images of it as such. There's a timeline. You can see the memory marks, which are the lines in either a name or their occupation or their status as a daughter, granddaughter, son, so forth is also there. In the middle picture, you'll see there is a timeline. And so significant events that happened during that 1817 and say to 1865 are noted. And down in the far left-hand corner of the outside of the memorial is the eyes of Isabella Gibbons, who was a cook, a slave, and worked at UVA. And then she became free and was also the first Black teacher at the Jefferson School, which is now Jefferson School Heritage Center. And you can see and learn more about her. But she, in the Freedom School, she was the first teacher. So again, her name is Isabella Gibbons, and her husband was one of the enslaved laborers who also became a minister. And up in the right-hand corner, that was right after the George Floyd incident. Those are medical staff, doctors, students, and so forth coming from the University Hospital to the memorial. So let's make sure we're all on the same page. And again, this is coming from me from a genealogical perspective. When we're dealing with slavery or slave era, understand that it is American history. Slavery is about economics. And yes, people were people before they were property. And as I learned over the years, people could be bought, sold, mortgaged, insured, used as collateral, rented, and gifted. All of the enslaved labor was rented to the University of Virginia. And of course, we know that some individuals were sold to the Deep South, and there was always people of color involved with military participation in this country. So there are some myths that are out there, and I call them misdirections. But you will see today that some of that is not good, not true. So we don't want to believe the myth about African Americans not being able to find their ancestors prior to 1870 federal population census. And I make this point because the census in research, that's the first place most folks go to, is the federal population census, which only comes out once every 10 years. So you're not totally getting an accurate count of who and where people are at. And realize that free people didn't have it much better than the enslaved. Yes, there was violence, more violence, and unbelievable violence. Don't believe those things about there was a good master or happy enslaved person. And most of this that I talk about today is centered around Virginia also. So again, if you're doing African American genealogy research, you're going to have to research the white people that are around and also those that had access to them. If you're African American and you descend from either free or enslaved, accept the fact that you are evidence that the ancestors survived this time in American history. I have some rules that I follow when I conduct research, and this is also what I teach. Follow the money, the land, the water, the community, and the faith of the people. These are the basics into genealogical research. Every one of these hopefully lead you to more information and also records and maybe resources. So when I first started with UVA, and real quickly, I'll say I actually retired from a nonprofit December 2018. I mean, totally retired. And I received the phone call in July 2019. Basically, we've got this project. What are you doing? You know, this, that, and other. So one of the first things that I received from Dr. Kurt Von Dock at UVA was this list. So you're getting a quick snapshot of the list. But what I want to point out is we get a year, we've got a date, we've got a slave owner, which could also be maybe an overseer. We've got the identity of possibly the laborer, what their status was, either free or enslaved, and if they were hired. And again, it would state if there was if the person was free, and the period time, document information, and then the money, and also the source of where the information came. So you're seeing an example of the list, which was compiled by Ben Ford, and this is where I started the work from. So from the list came challenges. Yes, I had dates and I had names, and I can say that 90 to 95% of the names of the enslaved are first name only. Only a few of them had surnames, and they were not the same as the slave owner's surname. And again, the same individuals were rented by different people, and they were rented at different times. So could the slave owner be also the overseer? Don't know. What Ben Ford did was research the financial records, and everywhere the university paid for labor, slave labor, it was noted. So that's how he compiled that list. So again, the status was enslaved or free. And I would think, okay, if they're enslaved, were they always enslaved? Or if they're noted as free, did they get free? So again, I see occupations and notes from those financial ledgers, but the biggest thing is I had no location. So I didn't know where I was working around. So for me as a researcher, I always tell people, start with what you know. I knew everything was going to focus around Thomas Jefferson, and he's in Albemarle County, and of course his home, Monticello. I knew there were historical homes in the area. I needed to get a map. I learned, which I moved here in 2003 and had no idea the significance that Albemarle County had 8 counties, and the only one in the state that has 8 counties that surround it. So I deemed that the research area. I knew there was a wealth of resources and support in the area, genealogy groups and other descendant groups that are there. And there would be lessons learned. And of course, we're not going to be able to find everybody on that list. I was trying to prepare myself because I knew there were going to be emotional times. And I'm not from here. I was born in Michigan. I'm not a historian, but I do wear that label of genealogist. And I believe we conduct research just a little bit different. So I developed a research plan to get myself going. I knew I had to start listening and asking questions. I did not know the local area in this perspective for the research. I had to learn what communities were around. I had to stay focused definitely at the local communities in each of the counties. Needed to learn about the slaveholders in each of the counties and how they connected. and stay involved with the genealogy groups. And of course, with a business background, I had to come up with some strategies that would keep me grounded. Had to figure out what records and resources are needed. So you're seeing an example of the Virginia Slave Birth Index on the right. Jean Cooper from the library at UVA, her index to records of the antebellum Southern plantations. I needed to find out what house repositories I could have access to. I knew they're the courthouse. Of course, I've been doing genealogy a long time. So I knew the historical societies, the public libraries, and the archives would be important to this research. And then again, figuring out who I could tap in during what time. So if you think about it, if I had an enslaved labor that was rented in 1820, I have to believe that that individual would be born at least by 1800 or prior to. What records and resources are going to be available for that? So I had to look also to find out if there were any plantation owner descendants in the area, just by seeing, okay, are there trees out there, public trees I could find, books on these folks, and so forth. So Google became my friend, just asking questions. And of course, I had local interaction with other genealogists. The Library of Virginia is just an hour down the road, a little over an hour down the road. They have this excellent website called Virginia Untold, the African American narrative. And the big plus was the access to the Chancery records, which you see on the right. Also looking at what other things I would need, books, materials, where am I going to gather information? And again, I didn't have a location to start. So I'm of old school. I tend to write things down. You can look on the right, you can see a register to colored persons over there that was available during certain periods of time. Looking at the books, and I'm involved with the 10 Million Names Project on the Genealogy Council. But I knew those would be places that could have names, that people were going to submit information to, like the 10 Million Names Project and things like that. Of course, online newspapers, articles, and of course, databases. And yes, the cup of tea, coffee, and wine to keep me going through this research. So another question comes up is, how am I going to get the word out? Well, I immediately went to social media, right? Set up a Facebook page, finding the enslaved laborers at UVA, and I also went on to Twitter or X, and also began hosting back in 2020, I believe it was, a Freedmenville Friday, which is a gathering every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time, where a bunch of folks all across the country come and we examine and look through the Freedmenville records and other things. So one of the things I did was build trees. This is how I started going. Okay, how am I going to get this out? How am I going to store this information and things? So you're seeing a sample on the right of the tree for the enslaved labor, which always notes MEL before their name, meaning Memorial to Enslaved Labor. Then on the bottom, you see SO, that represents slave owner, and so forth. So I had to have a way, as I start building these trees, to try to collect data or at least access other research that's available publicly, and to find out if I can build out to find descendants. My primary focus is to find descendants of the enslaved laborers, but I first have to find that labor and see if I can find records from there and then come forward. And again, on Ancestry, there is a primary tree called the Descendants of UVA Enslaved and Freed Laborers. And so it's available for everybody. Another place I did to put things out was on Wikitree. Some of you might not be familiar with Wikitree, but look where that blue arrow is at. That's why I signed up with Wikitree. Number one, it's free. Number two, it's a collaboration. Everybody is volunteers. And you know what? 39,120. Look at that. Over 39 million profiles of individuals. And I'm going to say 95 to 96% are whites. I knew I had to go there, be involved, share information, because that could help me lead to understanding these owners. And I also have some DNA connections if I went that route. But again, WikiTree is public and it's out there. They have categories such as you see on the screen, Virginia slaveholders. It could be several states. They have teams of volunteers all across the country and also outside of the country. So I just wanted to give you a glimpse of where information is at. This is the page I set up, Finding Enslaved Laborers, with the help of an intern. And each one of the errors on the spreadsheet you saw is listed there, so people can tap in and look at the spreadsheet and get what information is there. Once you can find someone, I use this as an example. Joseph Brand Jr., he was a former slaveholder. Looking on the left, that's his profile. See the blue arrow at the bottom. It links you right to Finding the Enslaved Laborers, and then also the slaves that he rented to UVA, which you see on the right. And you see the blue arrow on the right, and you see Fleming's, and you see Suki. There was also a Henry rented. What does UVA have to offer? Well, of course, special collections, the libraries, and of course, there's primary sources there at the university. But this site has came in really helpful, and it's called the Jewel site, JUEL, which is Jefferson's University, the early life. And so what you can see down there in red is a list of African-American individuals, and then also owners and overseers. So information that's available to the public, here's just a quick snapshot of the African-American individual. So I can cross-check from this site and my list and other things to see if I'm targeting the right person. And again, it might give a little bit more information. So here's a list of some of the enslaved, and you're only seeing a snapshot of the picture where there might not even be a name, but it was associated with an owner or a professor at UVA. Slave owner information, if I looked at Richard Price, which you'll see a little bit more about him in a couple minutes, this is what comes up. So it even tells me that he owned a James and a Jim, and where the location is at, and then what the sources were. Gold mine for me as a researcher to say, okay, I know I can check the 1820 census. I know also that I can look at the day book. And I'm looking at Jim and James. They were laborers that he rented to the university. So I got two names, and I know who their owner was. During the time of the building of the memorial in this commission that President Sullivan set up, Kurt and the rest of the commission started Slavery in the University, and they started a coalition called University Studying Slavery. Their goal was to bring other people together that were doing this type of research associated with the university. And also once a year, they hold a symposium and a conference per se, but they're sharing the data. And there's more information that you can get there and see the list of the 100+ universities that are connected. What also comes out of this is when I first started, I had a few descendants that I knew of. Well, those descendants have now grown into what is called Descendants of Enslaved Communities at UVA. They are a nonprofit, and their goal is to research and reclaim that narrative and to honor those enslaved and free laborers that had connections to the University of Virginia and the surrounding areas. So here's a partial list from their website that shows some of the names that I'm researching and the locations. And as you can see, there's several counties up there, and those are the surnames that we know of, either to the laborer or possibly to the slave owner. So looking also, there's projects that are going around in the country that are not backed by universities studying slavery, and they're descendant groups as well. Monticello has one, the Tulsa Massacre has one, and the GU 272 and so forth. Just to let you know, there's other projects that are going on. And at Monticello is the Getting Word Project, which some of you have probably heard of, and so forth. And again, these are not backed by the universities like in the coalition, but they are definitely available for folks that have ties possibly to a property or to a slaveholder. So if I come through the research and I find that people live past the Civil War, first place I'm going is what we call Record Group 105. That title is the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. So hopefully I want the slave owner to pass by 1865 and the enslaved laborer to live past. I want the slave owner, let me correct that, to pass before 1865. And then, of course, the laborer to make it through 1865. Because this is my favorite collection, and that is the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. It's a federal record. The military is overseeing it, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, but this is my go-to. And this is separate from the bank collection, two different collections, but their periods run about the same time. The Bureau is 1865 to 1872. There are a few pre-Bureau records in the state of Mississippi, Louisiana, and then the location of Fort Monroe in Virginia. So the refugees in this title are actually whites. Freedmen are formerly enslaved. And of course, the abandoned lands are folks that are returning to their land, possibly former landowners. Realize this collection has 3.5 million records, and they can be found on Ancestry, Family Search, and of course the National Archives. So if we look on the left, those are the types of records that are within the Bureau. This is why this is such a critical collection for me, is because I'm getting folks right after the end of Civil War if they survived. So you can see the types of records on the left, but then look at the column on the right. That's the type of information within those records. As a genealogist, we would call this a gold mine. Ages, race, residence, birth dates, marriages, maybe former marriages, death dates, former slave owners, and so forth. All of this is before 1870 federal population census. This is one of my favorite sites that I use. And number one, it's because I need a map. And again, not as familiar as most in this area. No matter how long I've been here in Central Virginia, there's always more to learn. So a couple of my friends did this Freedmen's Bureau website, Mapping the Freedmen's Bureau. And so again, look in the left-hand corner, we got a map. So I can see all of the field offices. Here's a snapshot, a partial of on Family Search, where it's showing me everywhere there was a field office that I could access that information. But what they did do, the National Archives, for the staff, they put together a descriptive pamphlet. And it says, okay, Virginia, you have 203 rows of microfilm. And these from row 1 to 203, this is what's on there. So when I go to the map, I can click on a location of a field office. But what's really critical for me in the research is if there's not one in the location, I can find what field offices were open in the area. So here's just a sample, a labor contract. and it's a Orange County, Virginia, and it's from the field office of Gordonsville. And basically, you're getting a date, you're getting the two parties, in other words, who's being hired and who's hiring. And it also is noting on this one that the one person, Lawrence, is a colored servant. And also, they're going to tell you how much money they're going to make, what they're going to be doing as a laborer being hired for, the location of where they're going to work, and how long the term is. And then you have the witnesses. And again, valuable information of locking down. And again, before 1870 census. So let's look at some option that I prepared here. So Watson and Price coming from the list. So you're just seeing where I copied from that spreadsheet list. And I looked, okay, 1821, Richard Price basically rented a Jim Henderson. Enslaved, I got the date, I got what money was paid, and where the information came from. In the middle part, January 3rd, 1857, we've got an Edbert R. Watson, and he rented Ryland, Nelson, and Henry. And of course, you see the information, $380. And then on the bottom in 1863, now the war's going on, the same Egbert Watson rents a Nelson Price, an enslaved person, and of course, the resource of where the information was obtained from. So my research questions were, where are the Price and Washington plantations, which county? That enslaved labor, Nelson, has a surname. Where did that come from? Is there a connection between Nelson Price, enslaved labor, and Richard Price? And how, if Egbert Watson is connected to Richard Price, because I'm seeing the surname of Richard, and then I'm seeing that same surname on an enslaved labor. So first, again, just as I mentioned earlier, I go set up a tree. So at this point that I can see what public records are out there. And I chose Ancestry to do it because I can all keep them in order in some fashion of a timeline as well. So you can see that I am looking at Egbert Reed Watson Sr., and you see his parents. And as you note, his mother's maiden name, Jane Howard Price, and her father is Richard Price. But until that tree was built and built out, I didn't know the connection. So now I know. So you're seeing the slaveholder side of going. I didn't have to go out further on Richard Price, but I also knew of the Argelon Price, his father. And then I noticed the Barber name, which is another name that I would be researching the enslaved at. And so again, you're looking at a slaveholder who rented Nelson Price, and his mother is a Price, which says to me, well, maybe Jane Howard Price was gifted Nelson, excuse me, from her father, Richard Price, which would be an option. So now meet Nelson Price. Got a tree up. Remember, it's going to have MEL on it. So, and I see he's had two wives, Martha Perkins and America Clark. So if you look on the right, that's the Freedmenville Registry of Marriages in Louisa County. And up here, 472, 1, 2, 3, the third line, we got Nelson Price, 48, and America, 46. And they're acknowledging that they are married. Virginia had the law February 27th, 1866, that said, Negroes, you are now able to get or legitimize your marriages. So you're taking people that would have been cohabitating, coming forth to the field office and acknowledging their marriage, but they're also acknowledging their children, as you can see on the sample. Again, this collection is very valuable to the research. So now Nelson's son from the second wife is Joel W. Price. So I'm walking through, and the research, it doesn't happen like in 5 minutes. This is over time, probably several weeks of going here. So you see Joel, which is the son of Nelson and Martha, right? Of course, got his marriage and his children and so forth. And then you can see where Gussie Price was Joe's daughter from the second marriage. So in the box in the middle, I'm walking through, and there I've got Gussie, right? And her children and so forth. So you can see Gussie going to Joel, going to Nelson. And then on the right, finding a find a grave for a Margaret Price, and her mother was listed as Gussie. And this is, again, resources of how I am finding descendants. So going forward, I want to continue engaging and building relationships with the historical societies, church groups, and genealogy groups, and continue to seek the slave owners' descendants just as much as the enslaved descendants. There's information to be shared if everybody is willing to share it. Now, the descendants of enslaved laborers are definitely a great group to connect with. They host a monthly membership meeting per se, and they have guest speakers or just sharing news and so forth. And some of the other descendant groups do the same thing. At William and Mary, you have the Lemon Project. They have what they call a monthly roundtable. William and Mary owned 200 enslaved laborers. So again, their charge is finding descendants of those 200. And Dr. Joanne Johnson is the one overseeing that project. So again, we've got this week, matter of fact, Friday and Saturday, the local Descendants of Enslaved Communities in Charlottesville is hosting a Descendants Day, and there's breakout sessions and so forth. So again, another way to get engaged, stay involved, and you never know where information is going to come from. So I just want to thank you. Here's some contact information. You're getting another glimpse of the memorial inside. And it actually, you can be at the rotunda and look down and see right into the memorial. And of course, that was Jefferson's thing about the rotunda. And the width of this memorial is the same, at the same scale as the rotunda. And you can see some of the descendants posing for a photograph there in front of the memorial. Contact information is there. And I'm going to throw back to Egypt and say if there's any questions, I'll be glad to take some.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy, for giving us such a formative presentation. For anyone that does not know, we record our meetings and we upload it to our Slave Legacy History Coalition YouTube channel. I know that Dr. Murphy provided a lot of information just in case you might have missed something that she said. It will be on the YouTube channel for you to view at a later time, and our previous presentations as well. They might be beneficial to you as well. Thank you, Dr. Murphy, for, again, your time in a wonderful presentation. I will encourage everyone, as Dr. Brown has done, raise your hand. I will call on you if you have a question. You're free to put it in the chat. And so first off, Barbara, good to see you here, longtime member. And I'll go ahead and let you ask your question to Dr. Murphy. Oh, you have to unmute, Barbara.
This is both overwhelming and exciting.
Thank you.
And
you see these gray hair, it's also challenging as well.
What I want to know is, is there work being done in the North, particularly, of course, in Massachusetts, seeking descendants of enslaved labor? Because that's certainly what I'd like to know. Because we've traced them here in Brookline, but we haven't traced the descendants.
Yeah, I believe Amherst might be doing something. And let me think. I pretty much believe that most of the universities, and of course in the North, all have some studies department, African American legacy, slavery legacies, throughout. And without pulling up that list to tell you what universities are involved, I believe Harvard and Yale are on there. So, and those are the ones I can think of. I believe there's a New Jersey, someone in New Jersey, but there's well over 100, and it's not just US. We also have University of Bristol, University Liverpool, and others in other countries. But I believe there are some in the North. And as you know, Yale has a new president, and that is Maury McInnes, which I can say she is part of and was involved with the UVA project. And she's the author of a book called Slaves Waiting to Be Sold. She was up at Stony Brook and just became the new president of Yale July 1st, I believe. So I would be looking to see what Yale's going to be doing, because the last 20 years that I've known of her and her work has all been around enslaved laborers in slavery.
And non-universities, are there towns that are doing this?
There's groups that are doing it, and that's why I mentioned some of those on the slides. In the North, right off the top, I can't recall any. The first thing that comes to mind is the GU 272, but that's not probably far enough north, for you. But again, I think looking at descendants groups, there was plenty, and I just threw up those few, but yes, I believe there's others non-university wise, but I would look to communities and as well as the historical societies to find out, because typically they partner with historical societies and things like that. And just find the genealogy groups. Now, AUGS, which stands for Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society, has chapters throughout the country in different states. I know there's chapters in Maryland and New Jersey and in New York. And so that would also be some to see if there's descendant groups going on there.
Right.
If I can
Thank
chime
you.
in, yes,
Dr. Bellinger.
the African American Historical and Genealogical Society does do a lot of that work. A lot of the members are, descendants of enslaved people, and some are descendants of freed people who were loyalists. So they're doing a lot of that work. And there is a chapter, a local New England chapter, which is meets every third Saturday at 1 o'clock at the library in Medford. And it is the most unique chapter of AUGS because it's the New England chapter, so it represents all 6 New England states, whereas some states have 6 chapters within a state. So it is one where whatever part of New England you're interested in, you could possibly get some help from. There are also local, as our wonderful speaker, Shelley Murphy said, there's wonderful work being done by historical societies. And I know the Lexington Historical Society did some work in identifying descendants of women who were featured in the Women's Monument that went up in Lexington this past May. One of them being Margaret Tulip, who had a freedom suit in Lexington in 1768. And they have located her descendants down to her 6th great granddaughter. So that work is being done here. And again, to underscore what Shelley Murphy has said, in Western Mass, particularly the Amherst area, there's a lot of work being done. UMass has a project they're doing. The town of Amherst has a project that is being run by some African-American descendants. And Amherst College is also doing some things. So yes, there's work that is being done. And she was very correct in identifying a lot that's being done in Massachusetts, and there's more than I'm just learning about in different local communities. So check with them, see what organizations are there, and we'll talk more, Barbara.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Bellinger, for that. Good to see you. I would like to ask you, Dr. Murphy, a couple questions that are in the chat. We have our good friend, Brian G. Jones from New York. He is wanting to know, how expansive was the Freedmen's Bureau, and was it local or countrywide organization?
Those field offices were set up throughout the South. And that's why I like that mapping site so well, because they've mapped where the field offices were at. And it's a little difficult coming through unless you're reading the descriptive pamphlet. But yes, they're throughout the South. Now, the Bureau, there's actually a microfilm during the closing and the shutting down of the Bureau that goes like I think it's 1872 to 1878. That is microfilm 2029, just to know, besides what you get on the field offices and the several levels within state and local, you also have the ones with all of the collections that are there as the Bureau is closing down. But yes, throughout the country, in the South.
Thank you.
Yes, the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, at one point had microfilmed all of the Freedmen's Bureau records. When they started digitizing them, the New England chapter of OGS was part of that project with the NARA office in Waltham. And one of the things that came about as a result of that was that the New England chapter of OGS was given all of the microfilm from NARA. And it is presently housed in the library at Suffolk University, and it is open and available to the public. So if you want to use the microfilm, and they have a couple of microfilm readers, just go to the university and to the library and ask the librarian, tell them that you want to use the Freedmen's Bureau records microfilm. It's there, it's available. Go use it. They have the whole collection from NARA.
I will follow up with that. The Smithsonian has a transcribing project or indexing project that's currently going on. Virginia right now is the only state where all the field offices have been indexed or transcribed. And that you can see when you go on Family Search, you'll see at the bottom when you pull up every name that is on a document, and I'm only talking about Virginia, it has the index of the names on the documents and things. And again, Smithsonian has a project going on, Family Search and OGS. I can't remember what year it was, maybe Selma Stewart's here, we can remember, they all partnered, and Family Search had even was able to put up, I think they purchased 1,100 rolls of microfilm. So there was a nationwide transcription project also to get those records up. So we're still looking, to help Smithsonian get those records up. But right now, Virginia's got the pleasure of all of their microfilm being indexed. And that came from, I think, Governor Kane was the governor at that time, put forth money and, to get those records indexed. And again, gold mine of information. And there's nothing better for us to look at a name and then it says former slave of in the name, or something right there, because that's what a lot of us are looking for. So it's exciting to see that and be able to put it together. And Selma Stewart, who's here, she was part of that project. She said Virginia's been available on Family Search since 2011. And so toggling through the other states as well without the chapters and the records that he mentioned is awesome to be able to go through. And again, it's right after the Civil War, but you're getting information about prior to and of course that current time frame.
Thank you for that, Dr. Murphy.
Yeah.
I would like to refer to one of our good friends, Anderson Flynn, along with Dr. Harris Gibson. They're both from Africatown, Alabama. Anderson, would you like to speak with Murphy, Dr. Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Murphy, and it's good to see all of you again. As some of you know, the last slave ship came into Clotilda into Africatown. Of course, Dr. Gibson and I went to school at the same school that was started by the descendants of the Clotilda. And so I was just curious if there's a university or other major organization that we can tap into down here in Alabama, Georgia, that could be assistance to us in terms of really working with on the scale of what you guys are doing in that process.
I think this is an opportunity for folks like your organization to join that coalition so you can see with the other schools and projects that are going on. And I can send you information. Some of the work that I've done with also with the International African American Museum, we hosted the Clotilda Descendant group on a webinar one Saturday. So lots of information was shared there, but I'll be glad to put my email in the chat, and I'm just putting my Gmail in here, and just contact me and I could give you some information to make some connections for that, Anderson. And
That'd
it's
be
in
great.
the chat, and anyone's out, but you know, welcome to tap in, you know, if you've got questions and things.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Dad, did you have a statement?
I just no, I just wanted to ask two questions. One, you mentioned faith as being, you know, part of that, you know, land, money, you know, what could you just elaborate on the faith aspect of that?
Sure. Every one of those resources, and again, that's just the thing, you know, now I'm probably known for it for saying that, following the money, but the faith is a community. When I first come into a community, doesn't matter what state, I'm looking for the courthouse, the cemeteries, the schools, and I'm looking for the churches. Because the churches hold information that might not be online, because not everything is online, and it's local. And to think about it, and I say this quite often, that anytime you go online, you're seeing something that somebody obtained at the local level. So it seems fitting to go where records were originated at. And I love looking even at the Freedmen's Bureau when we're looking on Fridays, and it's a book. And you know, Family Search went in and scanned that book, but it originated at the local level. What's there? Schools, churches, you know, groups and so forth, courthouse. So I would look to the churches to find out what church was in the area and what records do they have that they will openly share. And that's another point of maybe it's member list. Maybe it's a collection of funeral programs that's associated with a certain church. You know, is there a cemetery graveyard within the reach of a church? You know, could be both. And again, it's what do they have? Maybe my ancestor was one of the early founders of that church. What information do you have? I did some research for Frontier Museum in Stanton, Virginia, and a church was, land was given to a group of folks, which they established a church. But those founding families were all enslaved and became free, of course, after 1865. But then that was able to allow folks we could know who was there, who was involved with the church, and of course, look for the descendants from there. So a host of information and records, especially birth, deaths, and marriages at a church. I know one church in Loudoun County, just as a side note, and I was sitting there kind of shocked, and I thought, oh, they took attendance. It was a Methodist church in Loudoun County, but they had the slaves that were in attendance, which was required by some of those slave owners. And again, another source I would have never thought, oh, wait, let me see if the church has attendant records or this, that, and other. So bulletins, other information.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
If that helps.
Oh, it does very much.
Yeah.
The Cliff Notes version, yes. Let me just say, the tools that you've laid out today can be used by anybody if they're tracing their genealogical
yes.
heritage.
And it's not just to research enslaved people, that's genealogy, period. But you're going to have to go through some more hoops and things if you're researching, I'm going to say African Americans because of slavery and free. Yes.
Yeah, right. Which was
and ask more questions.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Egypt.
Thank you. So in our last couple of minutes before our meeting, you need to say something again, Dad?
Oh, I had written it into the, oh, sorry.
I see it.
No.
I wrote a question in the chat, and if there's a moment, it would be great to find out a little bit about if Dr. Murphy dug into the types of tasks and the buildings that specifically may have been constructed with the help of, or the efforts of the enslaved.
Real quickly, Thomas Jefferson had a plan, laid out the academic village. And there's a great talk, I don't know if it's out on YouTube or not, Dr. Lewis Nelson does about hidden in plain sight, I'll say it that way, because you had the buildings which housed the classrooms, the professors, and so forth. But what was underneath, where you're seeing on the ground level, the classrooms and the professors, say living quarters, what was beneath was where the enslaved people lived. And so the construction of that academic or academia village in those early designs, and he would be a great person to come on and talk about that. So I'm saying that to Dennis in Egypt and stuff. But they talked about, just like Monticello, they're there and you know they're there, but where are they? And so again, they're hidden in plain sight. Of course, the labor's going on, those buildings are being built, the construction and things, but you also had Jefferson and General Brigadier General John Harthwell Cox. They had skilled laborers. They trained them in carpentry, brick masonry, and so forth. And of course, on Monticello's website, you can read about the enslaved laborers that were skilled. Those are the ones on these different plantations that rented their folks there. And you see the ones, those bricks were locally made when they built these buildings and things. And they have pretty much, I think the School of Architecture pretty much can tell you the ones based on the date of when they were built. But Lewis Nelson would be that person to have on there. And I will say the biggest thing in the Charlottesville community, there's people that's never been on those grounds of the university. And I'm gonna say people of color. And you think about it, it's not a big city, it's a very small city that have never been on those grounds. And for UVA to go to the community, to engage the community, to help build that memorial and say, how best can we do this? I think that collaboration showed that they were serious about it. And it's, of course, a multi-million-dollar memorial and things that's just done beautifully. So again, I want to give kudos out to that the descendants of the community came forth and said, this is what we want to see. This is what we want to see. And so it came out beautifully as well. And so also, let me see, you said the task performed. So the building, the cooking, the carpentry, everything was involved. The professors were allowed to rent enslaved. The students were not allowed to bring their enslaved laborers to the grounds. And they say grounds versus campus. This is a Jefferson thing. And so you also had a few people that were free on those grounds that provided a service, making clothes, so tailoring and so forth, that happened. So a lot of skilled laborers, free and enslaved, helped to build that university.
Excellent. I just have one more. Thank you very much, Shelley. This
Sure.
is really fascinating. And we've visited, Egypt when we were on the grounds of the UVA, and it is a very moving and certainly
I have great conversations walking around that memorial.
right. So if you're down that way, it's worth stopping by to see. I did want to just mention Darlene Treguary. Are you here? Darlene mentioned in the chat that her where did I see it? I don't want to miss it. Oh yeah, Treguary, that her descendant Ismail Coffey fought in the Revolutionary War, and he's from Needham, Massachusetts. The reason why I brought this, and certainly we'd like to circle back and have a chat with you about that, Darlene, about your ancestor. Hello, how are you doing? So can you make sure that we have your email and everything, so we can get back in contact with you to discuss your ancestral heritage here. And I just wanted to throw it to everybody, that in doing, putting together monthly chats, it would be of great help if some of you have, discussions, of an institution, you have information that you would like to share on this platform. Please provide us with the contact information so that we can, build a directory and certainly have, you present that information to our wider audience. So we encourage you to do that. You can go to our website, which is SlaveLegacyHistoryCoalition.org, and you can enter it there, and somebody, probably Naomi, who will coordinate and reach out to you and coordinate the follow-up. So I just wanted to say that. And hello to everybody who I haven't seen all summer. And hello, Sarah, Bob Bellinger, and everyone, so many of you. And I don't want to stop because I'm going to miss somebody, but it's good to see everybody as we continue our third year. Brian, Beth, thank you, Sarah. Good to see you always, and Dr. Harrison. And Deborah's play is coming up in October, and you'll see more about that. And Barbara Brown, if you would put your schedule, in our chat so Naomi can get back to you so we can publish it. And let's plan on at some point you presenting, one of your a vignette of what you do in the tour of Brookline. Okay, that's what we look for.
And Dad, I want to take one last question from our good loving friend Paula Paris, who's dear to our heart. She is wanting to know, Dr. Murphy, are there any descendant groups in Eastern Canada, particularly Nova Scotia?
Yes. I will say yes. And matter of fact, I believe, I hate saying it, but it's in December, I will have the Nova Scotia Descendant Group on the International African American Museum webinar on the third Saturday. I will make sure that the Slave Legacy Coalition gets that schedule so they will be able to have that. And yes, so if you've got questions and things ahead of time or whatever you're thinking about, but they will be on. And they're descendants of the enslaved laborers. And of course, some of the folks, Leffie, and I'm gonna say came back to the United States and so forth. But yes, it'd be an interesting talk. And there's also another talk where they've been on before with another group. So yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank
Yeah.
you, Dr. Murphy. If there's any other questions that you have for Dr. Murphy, please enter in the chat. We will forward those questions to her and see whenever she has the time to answer it and to get back with you. We do want to be respectful of everyone's time. Again, our next meeting is next month, October the 9th. We are looking forward to seeing you all next month. And once again, Dr. Murphy, thank you again for this meeting. Very informative, fascinating. I'm sure that a lot of people are leaving this meeting having a lot more knowledge of how to get started on their journey.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friends, to see you again. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Appreciate y'all.
Everyone take care. Thank you. Good to see you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take
God
care now.
bless.
Always
care.
wonderful, wonderful.
Good to see you, Dr. Brown. Good to see you. Good to see you,
Always.
Cushion. Good to see you, Cushion. I know he's on the phone, but good to see him on here.
I
Thank
wanna
you,
know
everyone.
how much it would cost to have a genealogist for a certain period of time. Because I'm thinking that's a form of restorative justice for a town or a church that maybe one could work at.
Dr. Murphy is the person to ask.
Dr. Murphy.
Okay, and we can put you back in touch with her.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think it would be fabulous if we could do that around here.
I think so too. I think we might have something going.
All right.
Besides the universities,
Yes,
absolutely. Absolutely.
like a town doing it or
Yeah,
a
there you
church
go.
doing it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So so we need to get together anyway, Barbara. So, let's be in touch. Okay. And
Absolutely.
Beth, everyone, take care.
Oh,
Take care, everyone.
I'm gonna see Naomi, I think, and maybe Alex at the Philadelphia conference.
Yes. Oh, great.
You talking about the slave quarters?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's in October, right? We're still working on getting there. Okay.
I'll be speaking there.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting. Anyway.
Okay, good. That's good.
All right. We'll be in touch about that. You take care. All
Good
right.
to see you all.
Thank you. You too. Goodbye, everyone. Thank
Take care,
you.
Brian.